Most people, at least if they're sane, agree that receiving compliments feels good. You feel seen by the other person, and that makes you feel appreciated and special. There is nothing inherently wrong with that. In fact, it is completely normal to feel this way after getting a compliment. If you didn't feel anything at all, there would most likely be something wrong with you. Unless you're a very famous person who gets complimented all the time, but you, the average viewer, most likely aren't one of those people. However, there is one particular compliment which, at least in my opinion, can be very horrible and oftentimes, though not always, be more about puffing up the ego rather than genuinely noticing your gift and pointing that out in order for you to cultivate it. This compliment, which is used very often and whose value has gotten lower, is wow, you really are wise beyond your years. Or another version of it is man, you are so mature beyond your years. This compliment is meaningless and oftentimes doesn't achieve the purpose it's supposed to, namely pointing out a young person's supposed precociousness. When you ask the adult in question who gives this compliment for their definition of it, they have no idea. Either that, or they just give you something very broad and general, which would most likely apply to 99% of people, barring the fact that they have cognitive and emotional disabilities. The implication here is that this adult wants the child to grow up faster than what is psychologically considered normal. So, for example, if this so called compliment is given to a 10-year-old, then there is an indirect pressure on them to behave in a quote unquote more mature manner. So, this 10-year-old child is no longer free to be like anyone else their age. No, absolutely not. If they want to fulfill the supposed truthfulness of this compliment, they must always continue to up the ante and behave in a more mature manner. So, if they're behaving like a 15-year-old, now they must behave like a 21-year-old, etc. Why would any reasonable adult put a kid through such pressure? What is wrong with a kid just being innocent? A normal kid. This obsession with wanting to make everyone older and wiser than they actually are isn't something to be celebrated. As humans, we have to go through different biological and psychological states in order to become who we are. And our evolution doesn't stop until the day we die. When you tell a kid they're more mature than they actually are, you are indirectly telling them to stand out amongst their peers. They cannot behave like other kids. Otherwise, they lose this shallow admiration said adult has for the kid. The compliment will disappear, and the kid will go back to being a regular, run-of-the-mill kid. I know, shocker, right? A 10-year-old kid being silly and acting like other 10-year-olds? What horror. Our society will collapse if that happens. All jokes aside though, as adults, we need to be more creative and specific if we want our compliments to stick or land with our kids. We cannot just simply be reflexive and lazy. Being reflexive and lazy means we have no idea what we're talking about. And so it's safe to take this compliment and just toss it in the garbage can where it truly belongs. A high quality compliment is one that is specific, observable, and based on a positive behavior that has been consistent and results in a net positive not just towards the person receiving it, but also to those around them. In other words, how does the above compliment help those around the so-called wise beyond their years child, besides just puffing up their ego? And if puffing up their ego is the ultimate or even entire goal, then what message are we sending younger people? And how will that affect them when they grow up to become adults? Do you really want to create a monster in the future workplace where most people will resent such an individual and find them to be unpleasant and resistant to constructive feedback, I highly doubt most people who give out this cheap compliment even consider such questions, let alone their implications. It's also apparent that giving out such a compliment smacks of a lack of authenticity, and the emphasis is more on making oneself look good to the kid instead of genuineness and care about them. So the adult giving out the compliment is fed by their and others' ego, and they in turn feed the kid towards whom they give the compliment the same dose of ego, if not more so. As the Bible says in the book of Proverbs, pride comes before a fall or destruction. So let's make sure that this is not the vice we are trying to cultivate and encourage either in ourselves or younger people. Edification requires purity and truthfulness, specifically biblical truth. The truth does not lead astray, only lies do. Let's be sure we choose wisely next time we dole out compliments to our children and even adults and ourselves as well. So that's it for this video. If you like this content, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, and share to get notified about more videos like this one. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.